There comes a moment in every life when you realize the people who claimed to love you were only trying to shape you into something easier to control. The camera opens on a dim American apartment, the kind that feels too quiet for comfort. It's late past midnight, and the glow from a single lamp spills across the living room like a tired heartbeat. The air hangs heavy, thick with the kind of tension that only grows in silence. Outside the window, rain streaks across the glass, catching the orange glow of a streetlight like liquid fire. Inside, a man sits alone at the edge of his couch, shoulders slumped, eyes locked on the phone, resting in his shaking hands. He hasn't heard from her in hours, not a text, not a call, not even the cold sharpness of a delivered receipt. Just silence, that terrible, punishing silence. The camera creeps closer, slow and intimate. His thumb hovers over the screen, scrolling through old messages, each one a reminder of moments when he felt seen, heard, wanted. But now every word feels foreign, like a language he hasn't spoken in years. He whispers to himself that she just needs space, that maybe he said something wrong, that maybe he should apologize again, even though he doesn't remember what he did. His breathing slows, his jaw tightens, and there, in the soft flicker of the lamp, his eyes fill with that familiar, gnawing fear. The fear of losing someone who has already loosened their grip. The scene shifts to a view of the hallway outside his apartment. Long, narrow, empty. A single bulb buzzes above, flickering every few seconds like a dying memory. He stands in the doorway, staring down the hall as if expecting her shadow to return. But deep down, he knows she's not coming back tonight. The silence is intentional, punishment disguised as needing time, distance disguised as reflection, absence used as a weapon. This is how subtle control begins in everyday American lives, in apartments, bedrooms, kitchens where the emotional temperature changes before the weather does, not through yelling, not through threats, but through rules, invisible rules, psychological rules society never questions. But everyone feels binding them tighter and tighter. The camera transitions to a quiet montage. A woman wiping tears in the restroom at work, her hands trembling as she leans against the sink. A teenager sitting on the floor of his room, face buried in his knees, trying to decode the mixed messages from a friend who alternates between affection and cruelty. An older man at a dinner table, nodding silently while swallowing words he no longer believes he is allowed to say. Different lives, same emotional cage. These are the moments that twist the human mind, moments where silence becomes an answer, where guilt replaces authenticity, where fear replaces self-worth. This is what dark psychology looks like in real American households. Not dramatic, not explosive, but slow, quiet, psychological erosion. And every erosion begins with a rule, a dangerous rule, a rule that says, stay small, stay agreeable, don't question anything, don't make noise. This is what Machiavelli warned about centuries ago, how control works best when the controlled don't realize they're being controlled at all. The narration slows, voice calm and heavy, like a therapist in a softly lit office, drawing the truth from the shadows. Human behavior becomes most manipulable when connection feels scarce, when love becomes conditional, when affection is unpredictable, People forget their strength when their mind has been trained to accept emotional crumbs as a feast. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They just need to confuse you. The camera moves into the kitchen, soft shadows on the counters, a cup of coffee sitting half finished, steam gone cold. The man sits again, burying his face in his hands. He replays every conversation, every tone, every look, not because he wants to understand her, but because he wants to understand what he did wrong. That's the first sign. When you begin searching for a mistake you didn't make, you are already living under someone else's rules. The rule of silence, the rule of guilt, the rule of fear, the rule of compliance. These rules aren't written anywhere. They are learned through repeated emotional patterns, a sigh that lasts too long, a disappointed glance that cuts deeper than any insult, a sudden shift from warmth to coldness that leaves you disoriented, a quiet punishment that makes you desperate for reconciliation. This is dark psychology. This is emotional conditioning. This is how manipulators train the mind through inconsistency, withholding, unpredictable affection, and strategic silence. The narration shifts to another scene. A young woman sits on her bed with her back pressed against the wall, shadows stretching across her room like reaching hands. Her phone sits beside her, screen black. She doesn't touch it. She just stares across the room, lost in a haze of confusion. She can't tell if she's in love, being punished, or being slowly erased. She wonders if she's too emotional, too sensitive, too much. She wonders why she apologizes for existing. Her breath catches. She feels the ache of trauma, bonding the psychological chain that forms when pain and comfort come from the same source. It's not just attachment, it's survival, a desperate craving for validation from the very person causing the damage. Like a plant bending toward a light that burns instead of nurtures. This is how emotional abuse hides behind the language of love. People don't understand trauma bonding until they're living it. It's not about weakness. It's about hope. The hope that the good moments will return. The hope that the person who once made you feel alive will stop making you feel disposable. Manipulators rely on that hope. They feed it. They weaponize it. They use it to keep people waiting, hurting, chasing. The narrator breathes softly, like sliding deeper into the psychological truth. Society teaches dangerous things. It teaches people to keep the peace at any cost, to be silent rather than confront discomfort, to apologize quickly, to forgive endlessly, to understand everyone else more than they understand themselves. But peace without honesty is not peace. It is emotional surrender. A man stands in the doorway of his apartment, staring at the place where she last stood. His jaw clenches as he realizes the pattern. She leaves, he worries. She withdraws, he apologizes. She becomes cold, he warms up. She punishes, he seeks forgiveness. And she knows this. She counts on it. She uses it to shape him into someone who fears losing her more than losing himself. This is the dangerous rule behind many toxic relationships. The person who cares the most becomes the easiest to control. The scene shifts into a deep psychological explanation, wrapped in soft cinematic visuals, 35 mm film grain, nighttime streets reflecting neon lights, distant sirens fading into the background. Control doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like late night apologies for things you didn't do. Sometimes it looks like walking on emotional eggshells. Sometimes it looks like thinking you're the broken one when someone else is pulling the strings. Gaslighting doesn't start with blatant lies. It starts with subtle contradictions. You're overreacting. I never said that. You're imagining things. You're being too sensitive. You always make everything about yourself. Every phrase chips away at the victim's grasp on reality. Every contradiction creates doubt. Every moment of silence leaves room for fear to blossom. Manipulators rely on psychological fog. The less clearly you see, the more easily they can guide your steps, and society enables it. People glamorize emotional withholding as strength. They call emotional detachment maturity. They confuse dominance with confidence. They mistake fear for respect. But real connection requires vulnerability. Real intimacy requires mutual safety. Real love does not require self-erasure. The narration slows again, softer, more introspective. A quiet living room, a dim lamp glowing, a close-up of fingers tapping nervously on a coffee table. A single tear sliding down someone's cheek before they have time to wipe it away. There comes a moment when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. When the silence becomes too loud, when the rules stop making sense, when you start to see that the person controlling you is not stronger than you, just more practiced in your weaknesses. And then, slowly, carefully, you begin to reclaim your voice. You start questioning the emotional games. You start noticing the patterns. You start remembering who you were before someone made you believe your feelings were flaws. You start setting boundaries that feel like rebellion but are actually rescue. You start unlearning the rules society pushed onto you, rules that benefited everyone except you. A scene unfolds. The man from the beginning sits up straighter. His breathing deepens. The fear in his eyes shifts into something quieter, clarity. He stands, walks to the window, and watches the rain. For the first time in months, his shoulders relax. Not because everything is fixed, but because he finally understands the truth. He was never the problem. He was the target, and targets can become survivors. Survivors can become self-aware, and self-awareness is the first crack in the walls built to contain you. The camera softens into warm tones, like dawn breaking after a long night. You hear the narrator speak with calm certainty, as if offering a hand to the viewer. You're allowed to break the social rules that keep you small. You're allowed to walk away from conversations that twist your heart. You're allowed to stop explaining your boundaries. You're allowed to choose peace without guilt. You're allowed to rebuild your worth without anyone's permission. Healing will not be loud. It will be quiet, slow, like remembering how to breathe after holding your breath for years. Like rediscovering your reflection in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back. Like learning the sound of your own voice again. The man picks up his phone, then sets it back down, not out of fear, but out of control, his control. Something he hasn't felt in a long time. The narration moves into its final emotional fade. Doubt. The frame darkens to soft black. A single beam of warm light outlines his silhouette. You break free the moment you stop living by rules designed to control you and start listening to the truth your heart has been whispering all along. A long silence follows. Heavy, quiet, reflective, the kind that makes the viewer think about their own relationships, their own patterns, their own hidden wounds. The kind that lingers long after the video ends.